My friends, today I want to share with you about 13 early signs of dementia that we should never ignore. This isn't just medical knowledge. These are everyday changes we can all relate to: walking slower, with shorter steps, forgetting the name of someone familiar, misplacing keys, sleepless nights that stretch on, or suddenly losing interest in old hobbies. I once met a patient in his early 60s who thought forgetfulness was just part of aging. But in reality, his brain was already sending out signals for help. Have you ever found yourself asking the same question again and again, even though your children just answered? If we learn to recognize these signs early, we can support the brain with exercise, nutrition, sleep, and social connection. Those 13 signs are really gentle reminders. Take care of your memory and your spirit starting now. First, let's talk about sleep. It may sound ordinary, but sleep is actually one of the earliest mirrors of brain health. Many patients tell me, "Doctor, it's normal not to sleep well at my age." But no, it's not just age. If your sleep becomes restless, if you wake up often at night, or if you're sleepy all day long, those could be early signs of dementia. I remember one gentleman in his mid-60s. His wife said he would kick, punch, and talk as if fighting in his dreams every single night. They thought it was just age catching up, but it was actually a sleep disorder linked to changes in the brain. Have you ever had nights where you couldn't sleep, and the next morning your mind felt foggy, unable to focus? Science shows that poor sleep doesn't just make us tired. It causes inflammation in the brain and speeds up degeneration. Think of your brain as a house. During the day, it gets messy, cluttered. Only at night, in deep sleep, does the cleaning crew come in to tidy it up. If you never sleep well, that house never gets cleaned. Over time, the trash builds up, and that can harm memory, emotions, and clarity of thought. So please never underestimate sleep. It's not just rest. It's the key to keeping your brain sharp and at peace as you age. Have you noticed any changes in your own sleep? Second, let's talk about something we often overlook: changes in reasoning and judgment. Forgetfulness and confusion aren't always just age. I had a patient, a woman in her 60s, who used to manage her family's finances with ease. Lately, she began making poor choices, spending on unnecessary items, and leaving bills unpaid. Her family thought she just wanted to enjoy herself, but really, it was an early sign of her brain struggling to make sound decisions. Have you ever stood in your own kitchen only to forget how to cook a dish you've made for years? Or stared at an electricity bill unsure how to even begin? These aren't signs of laziness. They're your brain signaling it needs help. Another patient of mine once wore a heavy winter coat in the middle of summer and just a light shirt on a freezing day. At first it seemed funny, but behind it was the brain losing its simplest ability to judge what's appropriate. When the brain weakens, the parts that handle logic and risk assessment are affected. People might leave the stove on or sign financial papers without understanding them. I like to say our mind is like a compass. If that compass goes off course, we get lost in our own familiar world. The good news: if caught early, we can still support the brain through mental exercise, healthy routines, and family support. So, if you ever feel lost in tasks that once felt easy, take it seriously. It might be your brain asking for care. Third, let's look at small changes in senses and spatial awareness. Have you ever nearly tripped on stairs you've walked 1,000 times, misjudging the step? Or spilled water while pouring, surprised by your own shaky hand? Sometimes it's not just clumsiness, it's the brain struggling to process sensory signals. I recall a woman in her mid-60s who used to be an excellent cook. Recently, she complained her dishes tasted bland, flavors dull. In fact, a weakened brain can dull our senses of smell and taste, often one of the earliest hints of dementia. Another patient told me, Doctor, the TV and street sounds feel painfully loud now, like they're tearing through my head. Others lose hearing, unable to follow conversations with their children. Studies show that hearing loss in midlife is a major risk factor for dementia later. Imagine living each day in a world that grows duller, fainter, or unbearably noisy. Over time, the mind feels lost and begins to withdraw. That's why these sensory changes matter so much. They're not just about the eyes, ears, or nose, but about the brain that interprets them all. Fourth, let's talk about something often mistaken for just aging, losing joy, and withdrawing from life. One of my patients, a lively woman in her 60s, used to garden, daily laugh with her grandkids, and chat with friends. Then slowly, she grew quiet, sat alone for hours, and no longer called her friends. Her family thought she was depressed. But it was actually apathy, a loss of interest and motivation, often one of the first signs of dementia. Uncles and aunties, have you ever felt like you suddenly don't want to do the things you used to love? Maybe listening to a song, having a family meal, or chatting with friends. Things that once brought joy now feel distant. Outsiders might think, "Oh, you must be sad." But from years of working with people over 50, I can tell you this kind of apathy is not the same as depression. It lingers. It doesn't depend on circumstances, and it's often tied to the gradual decline of the brain. Think of your spirit like a lamp. In the past, the flame was bright and warm, but over time it flickers and fades. When the brain loses its ability to regulate emotions and motivation, even the things that once brought joy no longer light us up. Science shows that long-term withdrawal doesn't just weaken the spirit, it actually speeds up cognitive decline. When we stop connecting, stop engaging socially, the brain loses stimulation. And just like muscles, if the brain isn't exercised, it weakens. So if you or a loved one start losing connection with daily life, don't dismiss it. It might be your brain ringing the alarm, telling you it's time to pay attention and seek support. Now, the fifth sign I want to share with you is changes in posture and walking. I've seen many patients walk into my clinic with shorter steps, dragging their feet, as if their legs no longer want to lift. Families usually think that's just aging weak bones and joints, but often it's actually a signal from the brain, the control center for movement. One man in his 70s told me, "Doctor, I don't understand why even holding a spoon is hard now. My hands shake. My steps are short. I thought it was arthritis, but the medicine never helped." After a thorough check, I explained that these small changes sometimes come not from the joints, but from the brain's declining control of movement. Have you noticed yourself leaning to one side while standing, or your back slowly bending while walking? These changes don't just affect appearance, they raise the risk of falls. And as you know, for older adults, a fall can change everything, from losing confidence to becoming dependent on others for daily living. Science explains that when the nerve cells that control movement are damaged, not only do we slow down, but we also lose flexibility in everyday tasks, holding a cup, picking up food, even tying shoelaces. These are subtle signs that, if we pay attention, tell us the brain is sending a message. I want you to imagine this. Your posture and walk are like your body's signature. They tell the story of your health every single day. When that signature changes, it's time to listen closely. Don't just blame age. Sometimes it's your brain quietly calling for care, reminding you to seek timely medical help to protect your independence and clarity of mind. Now, the sixth sign, probably the scariest one we all fear as we grow older, is memory loss. Many people say, "It's normal, I'm old, my memory is worse." But that's not the full truth. Forgetting an appointment, repeating the same story, or misplacing your phone in the fridge, these clumsy moments, can sometimes be early signs of dementia. I had a patient, 62 years old, who came to me saying, "Doctor, my family complains. I keep telling the same story over and over until they know it by heart. But I don't even remember saying it." It sounds funny, but behind that smile was real concern. Have you ever walked into the living room and suddenly forgotten why you were there? That's short-term memory, starting to falter. As this goes on, the brain loses its ability to hold on to new information. And if it progresses one day, the patient might not even recognize the faces of loved ones. I've seen families in tears because their parent or spouse no longer remembers their name. That kind of loss is heartbreaking. Scientists explain that the brain has memory libraries regions dedicated to storing memories. But when the neurons there are damaged, pages of that library start to disappear. If we don't care for the brain in time, those gaps in memory just keep getting bigger. Imagine life as a photo album full of memories. Each forgotten moment is like a picture fading until it disappears. So when you notice changes in memory, don't brush it off as just aging. It could be a warning sign to take care of your brain health before those precious memories fade away forever. And speaking of memory, that brings me to the seventh sign, changes in personality and emotions. This is often the hardest for families to accept. Someone who used to be gentle and kind suddenly becomes irritable, suspicious, or even angry over small things. I remember one gentleman who had always been a calm, loving father. But when dementia set in, he began accusing neighbors of stealing or thinking his children were hiding things from him. Anxiety, depression, even delusional thoughts crept in. His family was heartbroken. They no longer recognized the man they knew. Have you ever seen yourself or a loved one go through mood swings that don't make sense? Happy one day, irritable the next, triggered by something as small as a loud noise or a strange environment. Science shows that when the brain regions controlling emotions are damaged, balance is lost. It's like a piano that once played beautiful melodies, but now produces off-key, unpredictable notes. The key thing to remember is this: these changes aren't bad temper or being difficult. They're symptoms of illness. Understanding that helps us respond with patience, compassion, and the right medical support. Because emotions are the bridge between people. And when that bridge starts to shake, love, patience, and medical knowledge are what keep it standing strong. And just now, when we talked about changes in personality, I'm sure you noticed something important. Dementia doesn't only affect emotions, it quietly chips away at something even more basic, our ability to communicate. The eighth sign, one that's easy to spot, but often saddens patients the most, is struggling to find words or language difficulties. Have you ever been mid-conversation and suddenly forgot a very common word? Like wanting to say table, but your mind goes completely blank, and all you can say is this thing here. For a healthy person, it happens occasionally and then passes. But for someone entering dementia, it happens often, again and again. One of my patients once told me he felt like he was trapped inside his own brain. His thoughts were clear, but the words just wouldn't come out. Picture this. You're sitting with your kids or grandkids, wanting to share a funny memory, but you get stuck halfway through, stumbling and stammering. Or you accidentally call your son by your brother's name. Or you hold a spoon, but mistakenly call it scissors. These moments chip away at confidence, making people withdraw and avoid conversations. Science explains this as damage to the brain areas responsible for language, like Broca's and Wernicke's regions, disrupting the connection between thoughts and words. The result isn't just broken sentences. It's also growing loneliness inside. I once saw an elderly woman who loved singing all her life. But as her dementia progressed, she couldn't finish a song. Instead, meaningless repetitions came out, and her eyes filled with tears, as if saying, "I'm still here, why can't anyone hear me?" What I want you to remember is this: language problems aren't just forgetting words. They're a warning bell that the brain is struggling to preserve one of our most precious human skills, the ability to connect through speech. And when this sign appears, the best gift we can give our loved ones is patience. Listen without rushing them. Give them time. Let them feel their voice still matters. Sometimes a gentle hand squeeze or an attentive look can carry more meaning than the words they've lost. And speaking of language difficulties, you see, dementia doesn't just take words away, it also slowly drains strength from our hands and legs. The ninth sign, very common but often brushed aside, is muscle weakness and loss of grip strength. Have you ever tried opening a jar lid that used to be easy, but now you twist and it won't budge? Or carry a grocery bag, only to feel your hand trembling, ready to give out? One patient of mine laughed sadly and said, "Doctor, I used to carry a 20-kilo rice sack. Now I can't even twist open a water bottle cap." It's not just weaker muscles, it's your body sending an alarm. Imagine one day, even small tasks, buttoning a shirt, tying shoelaces, or just holding a spoon, becoming a struggle. That helpless feeling doesn't only tire the body, it weighs on the spirit too. And few people realize that when muscles weaken and movement slows down, the brain also loses a major source of stimulation, speeding up the dementia process. Science shows that physical activity, whether it's walking, light exercise, or daily hand movements, acts like an electric current feeding the brain. Stop moving, and muscles shrink. Blood flow weakens, and the brain starts to run low on fuel. Research even proves that people who keep their hands and legs active also preserve memory and judgment longer. I remember a man in his 70s whose hands shook so much he couldn't hold a teacup. But after a few months of practicing simple hand squeeze exercises with a rubber ball plus daily walks, his grip grew stronger and his spirit lifted. He told me, "I feel younger, I forget less, and I talk sharper now." So my friends, weak muscles and grip aren't just about strength on the outside. They're a mirror of brain health on the inside. If one day you notice your hands aren't as steady as before, don't brush it off. Take it as a gentle reminder it's time to move to exercise, to protect both your body and your memory. Because as long as you can hold firmly, you're still holding on to yourself. And when we mention weak muscles, you see, the body warns us through tiny changes. That leads us to the 10th sign, an even deeper challenge: disorientation in time and space. Have you ever suddenly forgotten what day it is, or mixed up morning and afternoon? One of my patients told me he stood right in front of the same market he'd been to for decades, and suddenly couldn't remember the way home. He said it felt like being lost inside my own life. Heartbreaking, isn't it? Picture this. One day you step outside and the familiar street feels foreign. The shop signs don't spark recognition. Your home looks like it's vanished. That confusion makes your heart race, your steps shaky, and sometimes it leads to dangerous situations. Many families have called me in panic because their loved one wandered off, even just within their neighborhood. Medically, this is one of the most important signs of dementia. When the hippocampus, the brain's memory and navigation center, weakens, recognizing time and space becomes a huge challenge. This is very different from normal forgetfulness. Anyone can have a temporary lapse, but when confusion repeats and persists, it's a red flag. Interestingly, studies show that retraining the brain with environment-based activities like guided walks, practicing observation of details at home, or keeping a daily calendar can slow this decline. I recall a woman in her 60s who kept getting lost. Her son patiently trained her to use maps on her phone. At first she struggled, but over time it helped her feel more confident, less fearful of going out, and most importantly, gave her brain a chance to stay active. So friends, disorientation isn't just about losing your way on the street. It's about slowly losing connection with time and space, the very things we take for granted. If one day you notice yourself mixing up dates or feeling lost in familiar places, don't ignore it. That may be your brain's way of asking for help, reminding you to protect memory independence and peace of mind. And just now, when we talked about confusion with time and space, you probably sensed how fragile memory can be. But there's another sign, more common, more familiar, yet just as concerning, asking the same question over and over again. Have you experienced this? A loved one keeps asking, "What day is it today?" even though you just answered a few minutes ago. Or they ask the same story right after you've told it, as if your words never landed in their memory. At first, families often laugh it off as just old age forgetfulness. But for us, those who've worked with patients over 50 for years, this is one of the clearest early signs of dementia. I remember an older gentleman in his 70s. Every time his daughter came to visit, he'd ask, "Oh, you just got here," repeating the same question over and over, sometimes 10 times in just one afternoon. At first, his daughter patiently answered, but eventually she became both sad and exhausted, not knowing what to do. I told her, "This isn't because your father doesn't care or doesn't love you. It's simply because his brain can't hold on to new information anymore. It's like writing in the sand, one gentle breeze, and everything disappears." Medically speaking, this kind of repetition shows that the part of the brain responsible for short-term memory is weakening. The patient hears the words, but the memory never gets stamped in to stay, so they unconsciously ask again. For family members, this can be draining, even emotionally painful. But I always remind them the patient isn't doing it on purpose. They don't choose to forget. One way to ease the stress is to use visual reminders. Write things down. Use sticky notes, wall calendars, or digital clocks that display the date and time. Research shows that combining visuals with habit building can reduce the frequency of these repeated questions. You see, when the brain starts dropping new memories, even simple questions become silent cries for help. If we recognize this early and find ways to support them, we not only reduce their confusion, but also preserve warmth in the family, instead of letting frustration and sadness take over. So if you notice yourself or a loved one asking the same thing again and again, don't just sigh. See it as a reminder the brain is asking for care and attention. And speaking of repeated questions, there's another sign that can really confuse families: putting objects in strange, illogical places. Have you ever seen someone search endlessly for their phone only to find it sitting inside the refrigerator? Or a pair of shoes showing up in the middle of the kitchen, right next to the rice cooker? At first, it might seem funny. But when it happens over and over, it's no longer just being forgetful. It's actually one of the warning signs that the brain is struggling with memory and spatial awareness. I recall a woman in her early 60s. Her daughter told me once she found a sugar jar inside the shoe cabinet. The next morning, her mom insisted someone must have stolen it. That suspicion didn't come from her being difficult. It came from her brain no longer recording where things were placed. When the brain fails to store familiar locations, it leaves a gap. And to fill that gap, sometimes the mind convinces itself that someone must have taken the object away. From a medical perspective, this happens because the part of the brain that processes spatial memory is deteriorating. Simply put, the brain can't draw the map anymore for simple actions like where the keys go or which drawer the wallet is in. The result is a frustrating cycle for both the patient and their family, searching, forgetting, and suspecting. Now imagine having to research for your most basic belongings every single day. You open drawer after drawer, and when you can't find the item, you start to feel anxious, even angry sometimes, blaming the people around you. That emotional toll is heavy. My advice is to create fixed spots in the house. For example, always place keys in a dish by the front door, or hang a bag on the same hook. And just as importantly, don't rush to blame when your loved one suspects or complains. Behind that confusion lies fear, the fear of losing control, of not being able to manage one's own life. So if you notice misplaced items in strange places, don't brush it off as simple forgetfulness. It may well be the brain's way of asking for care and support. And right after misplaced objects, there's another sign that often frightens families even more: hallucinations. Have you ever heard someone say they saw a stranger standing in the room when there was clearly no one there, or that they heard footsteps or someone calling their name while the house was completely silent? Some patients even smell smoke or food that isn't actually there. To outsiders, it may sound bizarre, but for patients with late-stage Alzheimer's or those with Lewy body dementia, these experiences feel absolutely real, just as real as everyday life. I recall a 72-year-old man who told me he often heard children laughing in the living room every night. At first, his son thought he was joking. But when it kept happening, the family realized his brain was creating a whole other world, a parallel reality. The scary part is that, for the patient, that world is so convincing they may argue or even get angry when others deny it. From a medical point of view, hallucinations happen when the brain misfires in processing signals. Like a radio tuned to the wrong frequency, it generates sounds and images that don't exist. The patient isn't making it up, they truly experience it. And that not only confuses them, but also leaves their loved ones feeling helpless, not knowing how to comfort or explain. I want you to imagine this. You walk into your own house, and suddenly you see a stranger sitting at your dining table smiling at you. How fast would your heart start beating? That unsettling feeling, patients with dementia experience it all the time, sometimes even in the most familiar places. From my experience, instead of rushing to deny or dismiss what they see, it helps to gently acknowledge their feelings. You might say something like, "I understand, that must feel scary. But I'm here with you, and you're safe." More than explanations, it's the calm voice and presence of loved ones that soothe them best. So if one day your parent tells you about invisible visitors, don't be quick to think they're making it up. Remember, it's their tired brain sending a message it needs patience and care. Sometimes what they truly need isn't a rational answer, but the comforting embrace of family. And as you've just heard, dementia isn't only about memory, speech, or behavior. But trust me, there's still so much we can do to prevent and slow it down even well into our 50s or 60s. Think of your body and brain like a garden. If you water it, give it sunlight, and nurture it, it will thrive. But if neglected, weeds and pests will take over. For the brain, that nurturing comes from unhealthy daily habits. Take Mary, one of my patients. She's 68 and worried because her family has a history of Alzheimer's. Instead of living in fear, she chose to change her lifestyle. She eats a Mediterranean diet full of vegetables, fish, and olive oil. She takes morning walks. And at 65, she even started learning piano. She often tells me, "Doctor, every time I practice, I feel like I'm watering my brain." And research supports her learning new skills. Reading, playing chess, or joining a club stimulates brain cells and builds new neural pathways that help protect against decline. So let me ask you, when was the last time you tried something new for yourself? A dance class, a new novel, or even just learning a new way to use your phone? Small things like these are big keys to brain health. Managing chronic conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease is just as crucial. They're like underground currents that silently erode the brain over time. And of course, stay away from smoking and heavy drinking. They'll never be your allies in protecting memory. Most importantly, Don't hesitate to get checked if you notice warning signs. The earlier the detection, the more chances for timely intervention. Don't wait until memories have slipped too far away to try to hold on to them. Brain health isn't something distant. It's built from the small choices we make every single day. And every day, you have the chance to plant another seed of vitality in your mental garden. As we've gone through together, there are 13 important warning signs, small bells ringing, to remind us that the brain needs attention. Spotting them early doesn't just help doctors diagnose. It opens the door to slowing progression and improving quality of life. I remember James, a 72-year-old patient. He came to me simply because of little forgetfulness. His family was worried, but he thought, it's just old age. Thanks to early detection, he adjusted his diet, started exercising, and joined a community group. 6 months later, he came back with brighter eyes, telling me he was enjoying chess with friends again, and confidently driving to the park every morning. He said, I realized I didn't lose my memory, I just needed to learn how to take care of it. Do you think aging automatically means helplessness? In reality, what matters isn't how many years we live, but how many good years we live. And quality often starts with one small decision, listening to the body's signals, not ignoring them, and not being afraid to talk to a doctor. From a medical perspective, the human brain has an incredible ability to adapt. Even when damage occurs, the brain can still create new paths to compensate. But to make that happen, we have to start early. That's why I want to leave you with this message. These 13 signs aren't meant to scare you. They're here to empower you, to give you the right to know, the right to prevent, and the right to live a fuller, calmer old age. Because you deserve a life that's not only long, but truly worth living. My friend, if you found these stories and lessons helpful, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the next videos on health, and you'll also give me the motivation to keep sitting here preparing each story and lesson with care, just for you. I believe that no matter our age, we all deserve to live healthy, to understand our own bodies, and to be supported by a warm community. Each subscription from you is like a promise that we'll go through this journey together, not alone, not lost. So if you want more real experiences, knowledge, and inspiring stories, take just a few seconds to subscribe. I promise those few seconds will bring lasting value to your health and your life. See you in the next video.